So we're just going to take off these 5 19mm lug nuts. Take your wheel. If it doesn't want to break free, we'll just put one of those lug nuts on real quick a little bit. We come from behind with some leverage. Remove the wheel. So if you look right in here, you can see where the caliper piston is. We need to push that caliper piston so it's in the in position. To do that, I'm just going to take a pry bar and go right like this. So it's coming across and it's hitting up against this outer pad. And then I'm going to slowly pry on it, just like this. And what that's doing is it's pushing this piston into the caliper. There we are. I'm replacing the brake so I can go right up against the pad. I'm just going to continue pressing this in. I'm being very careful not to hit up against that caliper piston because it's only ceramic and I don't want to damage it. That's all the way in. We can continue. So next I'm going to use a pocket screwdriver. And I'm going to open up this clip right here. Same for this one. That's just making it so the brake hose is away from the ABS wire. Next we're going to move along to these 2 bolts right here. These are your caliper slider bolts. I'm going to use a 13mm. I'm going to use some pliers on the other side there. I'm just going to try to break it through. Same thing for this one. Remove your caliper and check your piston. Make sure there's no cracks and there's definitely no fluid leaking. This looks great. So now you just want to make sure you hang your caliper just like this so you don't have any pressure on your flex hose. So we'll remove our pads. You'll notice the inner pad has your brake pad indicator. The outer pad does not. We're going to move along to the caliper bracket bolts. These are 21mm. I'm just going to leave that one in there a couple threads. There's our caliper bolt. The lower one's the same. So when you notice your rotor's stuck on here, just like this, you've got a whole bunch of corrosion and whatnot all on there, I like to take just one of our lug nuts, put it on there a few good threads, make sure you're wearing your safety glasses, grab your bonking device, and give it a whack. Bonk. The lug nut did its job. It prevented this rotor from hurting me. Next, you're going to use either your brush, try to get off all this rust, or you can use one of these tools. Once you've done as much as you can with that tool, you're probably still going to need your brush just to get in between the lug stud and the hub area there. That looks pretty decent. If the center of your hub looks like this, obviously you're going to want to try to get the majority of this out of here. You don't want it to go falling down in between the rotor and the hub and causing a pulsation. So we're just going to get on the back side of the hub here real quick. Nice. Use a little bit of parts cleaner. Make sure you have your collection receptacle under there. Clean up this area. That looks pretty good. The areas in the center that you see some rust, that's okay because it's actually a divoted in area. Along the edge right here and along the inside, that's where it's raised up. So you don't have to worry so much about in here. So we have our caliper bracket. We're going to pull this slider out of here. This rubber boot right here also comes off. Same for this one. And that leaves us with our slider holes. They still have grease inside of them. We're going to make sure we clean those out. We're also going to clean up these areas right here where the pads are going to ride. Right along this edge of the caliper bracket, you're going to notice that a lot of times there's rust buildup. You want to make sure that you clean that up as good as possible so you can have a good seal of the rubber to the metal. Otherwise, you'll have moisture getting in there and potentially a bad slider. So now that we have those cleaned up, they look pretty good, we're going to continue on to cleaning this up. You can use your brush, or you can use your little tool, whatever you're into. That looks really good. So does this. And of course the other side. So now we're just going to clean up our sliders. We just want to get the majority of this grease and gunk off of there and make them as clean as possible. If your slider is rusted or has a whole bunch of pits all over it, you're definitely going to want to clean it up. You want to have smooth surfaces so it can flow smoothly inside of your caliper slider holes in the brackets. Another thing to pay quick attention to is this lip right along here. That's exactly where the boot's going to ride. You need to make sure that that's clean as well. If it's not, clean it up. You need to have good contact, rubber to metal there. That looks great. Lastly, in our cleanup process, you want to make sure you clean up your boots. These hold a lot of gunky grease inside there. It could be contaminated or even have some moisture in there. So let's get out as much of that old grease as possible. That looks pretty great. Let's do the same for the other. So now we're just going to use a little bit of caliper grease. I like to go just right up along the top up here. I grab one of my boots, slide it up there, and give it a little wiggle, just to make sure that there's grease all along that lip that I told you to make sure you cleaned out. Once you know you have grease there, lube up the rest of the slider pin. Slide it into this hole. At this point, you want to also make sure that you have the grease up along the lip on the bracket itself. Put the boot so it's going up over it, and then spin that around a couple more times. Now we have grease going all the way around this lip here and over here, and that's going to keep the moisture out of there. We're going to do the same to the other slider pin. We're going to make sure we put a good coating of grease along the areas of the bracket that we just cleaned up. Same to the other side. Okay, so we have our tins. You'll notice that the tins have a long flat side and a side that has a little flippy-do. The flat side goes along the bottom area, and the flippy-do comes up along the top area. You're also going to notice that you have this on one side. This part right here is super important. It needs to face away from the rotor. The flat side needs to face down, and the little flippy-do faces up. So just slide it in, give it a squeeze. Do the same for all. We're just going to spray this hub with some copper never seize. Next, we're going to grab our rotor. I'm just going to slide it on backwards here for a second. Just a little bit of parts cleaner. Wipe down the inner braking surface. Turn this around. We're going to use one of our lug nuts. That's just going to hold the rotor from wobbling around. It's important to pay attention to which way the slotting goes and the way that the drills go. You want it to go in this direction. If it's facing the other direction, it's not going to cool right. Just going to clean this up. So we're going to take our caliper bracket, put it over the rotor, take our 2 bolts, I'm just going to bottom these out, and then we'll torque them down to manufacturer specifications. So we're going to torque these caliper bracket bolts to 100 foot-pounds. We'll take our pads. We remember we had the wear indicator on the inner pad facing down. Should want to just go right in. Perfect. Make sure they move around. If they were hard to get in, your bracket's probably not clean enough. That feels great. We're just going to use a little bit of our caliper lube. You're going to go right along the piston on the caliper, and then also the 2 ears on the caliper. So essentially just where the caliper touches up against the pad, and that's for vibration dampening. Slide this over, grab our 2 caliper bolts, start that one in. Let's snug them up. All right, we're going to torque these down to 28 foot-pounds. All right, so we've got our torque wrench set to 28. We're We're going to use some pliers to make sure we hold those sliders so they don't spin. Let's get it torqued down. Torqued, torqued. We have our ABS wire here. You want to make sure that you put that back into its little areas that is supposed to be clipped in. Awesome. All right. Now at this point, you're going to want to do the same to the other side of the vehicle. So we're going to take this lug nut off of here. Grab our wheel. Put it back up on there. Start all these lug nuts. We're going to bottom out the lug nuts. Then we're going to torque them down to manufacturer's specifications. All right, so let's torque these down. 100 foot-pounds.